We're here to unpack the ideas and the research that really shape how we think about, well, success, our own intelligence, and maybe even our potential.
That's right. And today we're diving deep into something called mindset. It sounds simple, maybe even a bit trendy, but it's this fundamental belief about ourselves.
Often unconscious, right?
Totally. And it guides so much our ambition, our personality, whether we actually reach for what we're capable of.
So our mission today, we're going to really explore these two big ideas, the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. We'll be using the core research, looking at the evidence.
Yeah, the goal is to help you, listening right now, figure out which system might be running the show for you, especially when things get tough, when you're facing a challenge or even dealing with failure.
Okay, let's get right into it, because the way this whole line of research started is actually pretty surprising. It began with psychologists watching kids, just watching them try to solve hard puzzles.
Right. And you'd think, okay, a kid hits a really tough problem, one they maybe can't solve. What happens?
You'd expect maybe frustration,
Yeah.
giving up, tears even, or at least some way of coping, trying to manage the feeling of failing.
That's the logical guess. But what some of the researchers saw was completely different. They set up these puzzles, starting easy but then getting really challenging, deliberately designed to make the kids stretch.
And some kids, when they hit that wall, they didn't just cope. They actually got excited.
Exactly. It was startling. There's this one famous story, this 10-year-old boy. He's struggling. You can see he's frustrated, maybe grunting a bit. But then he does something amazing. He pulls his chair closer, rubs his hands together like he's getting ready for something great, and he just blurts out, "I love a challenge."
Wow. I love a challenge, not I hate failing.
Precisely. And there was another kid faced with a problem that needed a totally new approach who said, apparently with real intellectual curiosity, I was hoping this would be informative.
Informative.
Yeah.
That's just, it completely reframes failure, doesn't it? It's not an endpoint, it's data. It's learning.
It became crystal clear. These kids weren't just dealing with difficulty. They seemed to relish the moment they had to push their limits.
And that difference, that shock right there, that's the seed, isn't it? The core distinction between the two mindsets we need to unpack.
That reaction really lays the groundwork for these two fundamental belief systems.
Okay, let's define them clearly. First up, the fixed mindset, sometimes called the static mindset. What's the core belief here?
Well, it's the idea that your basic qualities, things like how smart you are, your personality, your artistic talent, even your character, they're essentially carved in stone. You've got a certain amount, and that's that.
You either have it or you don't.
Exactly. And if you truly believe that, it has massive consequences for your goals in life. Suddenly, everything becomes a test.
A test of that fixed trait.
Right. Your main goal, often consuming, becomes look smart, don't look dumb, look talented, avoid looking incompetent. Every situation is high stakes. Will I succeed or fail? Will I look like a genius or an idiot?
That sounds exhausting, like you're constantly performing, constantly proving yourself.
It really can be. Now, contrast that with the growth mindset.
Okay.
This is the belief that your basic qualities aren't fixed at all. They're things you can cultivate, things you can develop. Through dedication, through hard work, through good strategies, passion, learning from mistakes. Basically, through effort and experience.
So intelligence isn't just something you have, it's something you can build.
Precisely. And the really powerful implication of this belief, it means your true potential is unknown. Unknowable, even.
What do you mean unknowable?
Well, if you can always grow and develop through effort, who's to say what you can achieve with years of passion, toil, and training? It's impossible to predict the ceiling. You just start where you are and see how far dedication can take you. The path is open.
This feels very modern, very empowering. But you mentioned history. Is this really a new idea?
Not entirely. We often think the default view, especially historically, leans towards fixed traits. But get this. Think about the IQ test. The ultimate symbol of fixed intelligence for many people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A single number defining your smarts.
Well, the inventor, Alfred Binet, working in Paris around the turn of the 20th century, he was actually a huge proponent of the growth view.
Wait, really? The IQ test guy thought intelligence could grow.
Absolutely. He strongly argued against the idea that intelligence was fixed and unchangeable.
Then why create a test to measure it? That seems contradictory.
It does until you understand his reason. He designed the test for a very specific, very practical, growth-oriented purpose. It was to identify children in the Paris school system who were not benefiting from the standard education.
So not to label them as permanently dumb.
No. The goal was to find the kids who needed different kinds of help. so that new educational programs could be created specifically for them to get them back on track. Binet fundamentally believed that the right kind of education and practice could bring about real, substantial changes in a child's intellectual functioning.
Wow. That completely flips the script on how we usually think about IQ tests. The whole cultural baggage of the IQ score as this final fixed verdict it's a total misunderstanding of Binet's original intent.
It really is. He saw it as a starting point for intervention, not a life sentence.
And this idea of unknowable potential, it's not just theory, right? You see it in real life.
All the time. We love to tell stories about geniuses seemingly born brilliant, but the reality when you dig into biographies is often years and years of struggle and development.
Like who?
Well, think about someone like Charles Darwin or Leo Tolstoy. Giants in their fields, right?
Absolutely.
Both were considered pretty ordinary kids. Nothing in their childhood screamed, future world-changing genius.
Okay, that's surprising. What about other areas, like sports?
Oh, definitely. Take Ben Hogan, one of the all-time golf greats. If you looked at him as a kid with a fixed mindset lens, you'd have written him off.
Why? Wasn't he a natural?
Far from it. He was famously awkward, uncoordinated, kind of graceless as a child. His early golf swing was apparently a mess.
So how did he become Hogan?
Relentless, methodical, grinding practice. Years of it. There's the famous story of him basically rebuilding his entire swing, his grip, everything, spending hours and hours on the practice range, day after day. He literally forged the coordination and skill he wasn't born with. His success was a testament to overcoming that initial assessment.
So it wasn't innate talent, it was constructed talent.
Beautifully put. And it's not just sports or science. Think about the arts. Cindy Sherman, the hugely influential photographer,
Right.
she actually failed her first photography course.
No way.
Yep. Didn't have the eye right off the bat. And Geraldine Page, a really celebrated actress, early on, she was flat out advised to give it up because she supposedly lacked talent.
It really drives home that the growth mindset is what allows people to persist through that initial not good enough phase, doesn't it? It keeps the door open for transformation.
It's the only way transformation can happen, really.
Okay, so if the growth mindset allows for that journey, the fixed mindset seems to slam the door shut pretty quickly. Let's dig into the consequences of believing your traits are fixed. You mentioned this need for success to be flawless.
Yeah, not just flawless, but ideally effortless and immediate. If you believe you're naturally brilliant, then having to struggle or taking time to learn something feels like evidence that you aren't actually brilliant. Effort becomes a sign of deficiency.
Which twists how people even define feeling smart.
Exactly. The researchers asked people with different mindsets, when do you feel smart? And the fixed mindset folks, they said things like, when I don't make any mistakes.
Perfection.
Or, when something is easy for me, but other people can't do it, it's about inherent superiority and ease.
Wow. Okay, and the growth mindset people, what do they say?
Completely different perspective. They felt smart when, and I quote, when it's really hard and I try really hard and I can do something I couldn't do before.
So intelligence is linked to the process of learning and overcoming difficulty, not just the outcome.
Precisely. It's about stretching, engagement, progress, not about effortless perfection.
And this difference has huge implications for how people handle setbacks, right? Because life isn't always easy or flawless.
Huge implications. The psychological cost of the fixed mindset when faced with failure can be absolutely devastating. There's a classic research scenario they use.
Tell me about it.
Okay, imagine this. You get a C+ on a midterm exam that you studied for. Then later that day, you get a parking ticket. And to top it off, you call a friend and they kind of brush you off.
Okay, annoying day, frustrating, definitely. But not exactly the end of the world.
For someone with a growth mindset, yes. Annoying, maybe disappointing, but manageable. But for someone deep in a fixed mindset, the reaction can be catastrophic.
How so?
They don't just see these as isolated, unfortunate events. They internalize them. They see them as a direct measure of their fixed, inadequate self.
So the C+ isn't just a grade, it's proof that I'm stupid.
Exactly. The researchers got responses like, I'm a total failure, or I'd feel worthless and dumb, everyone's better than me. One person just said, I'm slime.
Slime, wow. From a C+ and a parking ticket. That's intense. What's happening psychologically there?
It really comes down to attribution. The fixed mindset attributes that failure to something internal, stable, and global, meaning, I failed because I am fundamentally flawed. Internal, this flaw is permanent, stable, and it affects everything global.
So there's no escape. The failure feels like a final verdict on your entire being.
Right. And that kind of thinking leads to really maladaptive coping strategies. Instead of trying to fix the situation, they often withdraw or lash out.
Like what?
The fixed mindset folks, asked how they'd cope with that bad day, said things like stay in bed, get drunk, eat, or even pick a fight with somebody, break something.
So avoidance, self-medication, or aggression. Basically anything but constructively addressing the problem.
They're essentially creating paralysis or further self-sabotage out of events that weren't initially catastrophic. They amplify the failure.
Okay, and the growth mindset folks in that same scenario.
They still felt bad, obviously. Nobody likes getting a C+ or a ticket, but their reaction was geared towards action.
Yeah.
They attributed the failure differently, not to I am dumb, but to things like I didn't use the right study strategy, or I need to pay more attention when I park, or maybe my friend is having a bad day, I should check in later.
So they focused on things they could change or understand. Transient, controllable factors.
Exactly. Their sense of worth wasn't on the line with every single event. So instead of paralysis, they thought about solutions. I need to study harder or smarter for the next test, be more careful parking, figure out what's up with my friend. They mobilized.
This desperation in the fixed mindset, this need to prove the talent right now, to avoid any hint of flaw. Does this explain some of those really high-profile cases of fraud, like in journalism?
Absolutely. It's a key insight. Think about Janet Cook, who won a Pulitzer for a fabricated story, or Stephen Glass, the young star at the New Republic who invented sources, quotes, entire events for his articles.
Why would seemingly successful people do that?
Because the fixed mindset demands you be the genius instantly. It can't tolerate the messy, often slow, iterative process of becoming good at something, admitting you couldn't find the right source, or that a story was taking longer than expected, or that you needed help.
That would feel like admitting a fundamental lack of talent.
Precisely. For someone like Glass, it seems fabrication felt like the only way to maintain the facade of the whiz-kid reporter who always delivered amazing stories effortlessly. The pressure to be brilliant now overrides the ethics of how you get there. They couldn't afford, psychologically, what the research calls the luxury of becoming.
The luxury of learning and making mistakes along the way.
Yeah. It feels too dangerous in a fixed mindset. Everything feels like it's on the line right now. A single test score, a single performance review feels like it could define you forever.
Like that story of Loretta, the girl judged by one kindergarten test.
Exactly. That single data point, interpreted through a fixed lens, shaped her educational path and self-image for years, completely contrary to Benet's original intention for such tests.
And this fear of failure, this tying of self-worth to external validation, it can have truly tragic consequences, can't it?
It can. The example of Bernard Louiseau, the celebrated French chef, is just heartbreaking.
He had 3 Michelin stars, right?
Yep.
The absolute pinnacle.
Yes, and his suicide seems to have been triggered not even by losing a star, but by a drop in a different guide's ratings and just the rumor, the possibility that he might lose a Michelin star in the future.
Just the idea of failure was enough.
For someone whose entire identity and self-worth were seemingly fused with that external fixed rating, those 3 stars, the potential loss was apparently unbearable. It's the terrifying endpoint of the fixed mindset. If your worth is tied to a fixed trait confirmed by external praise, and that praise is threatened, your entire self can feel like it's collapsing. There's no room for I can work harder and earn it back. The judgment feels final.
Wow. Okay, that picture of the fixed mindset is pretty bleak. The fear, the paralysis, the potential for self-destruction. Let's shift gears completely now. Let's look at the other side. The growth mindset in action. How does it view effort?
It's a total reversal. In the growth mindset, effort isn't the enemy, it's the key. It's the engine. Effort is what takes your current abilities, whatever they are, and turns them into accomplishment. It's what ignites potential.
So it's not that effort means you lack talent.
No, it's that even geniuses have to work hard. Effort is the path to mastery, not a sign you shouldn't be on the path.
This reminds me of that amazing story about George Danzig, the math student.
Oh yeah, classic example. Danzig, a grad student at Berkeley, shows up late for class one day, sees 2 problems written on the blackboard. He assumes they're homework, copies them down, thinks, wow, these look harder than usual.
Okay.
Takes them home, works on them for days, really struggles, fills up notebooks, but eventually cracks them. He goes to his professor, apologizing for handing the homework in late.
Yeah.
The professor is absolutely floored. Because they weren't homework problems.
What were they?
They were 2 famous Famously unsolved problems in statistics that mathematicians had been wrestling with for years.
He solved unsolved problems because he thought they were homework.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
His mindset made all the difference. He didn't look at them and think, these are legendary unsolved problems, I could never solve them. He thought, this is my assignment, it's hard, I need to apply effort and strategies. And that belief, that framing, allowed him to persist where maybe others, intimidated by the unsolved label, wouldn't have even tried.
That is incredible. Persistence born from mindset.
Exactly. And you see this relentless persistence, this embracing of challenge everywhere in high achievers, especially in sports. Think about Mia Hamm.
Soccer legend.
Right. Her explicit strategy for getting better, she said, all my life I've been playing up. Meaning she deliberately sought out harder competition. She played with and against players who were older, bigger, more skilled, more experienced. She used their superior ability as a tool to force herself to stretch and improve faster. She knew that staying comfortable wouldn't push her.
That takes courage, to constantly put yourself in situations where you might fail or look bad.
It does, but the growth mindset reframes looking bad as learning fast. And then there's Patricia Miranda, the Olympic wrestler.
What's her story?
She started out as, by her own account, a chubby, unathletic kid in high school. No obvious natural talent for wrestling, but she fell in love with the sport and just committed to incredibly dogged, focused, relentless training. She literally transformed her body and skills through sheer hard work and smart practice over years. She went from that starting point to winning an Olympic medal.
That's pure growth mindset proof right there. That potential isn't fixed, even physically.
It really is. And comparing the mindsets of champions can be so revealing. Look at the contrast between someone like John McEnroe and Michael Jordan.
Okay, two titans of tennis and basketball. McEnroe first.
Immense natural talent, obviously, but very much a fixed mindset. He seemed to believe that talent was the main thing, maybe the only thing. Effort was secondary, almost an insult.
And how did that play out?
Well, he often struggled mentally when things got tough or when he felt unfairly treated. He'd default to anger, blaming officials, tantrums. It seemed like challenges were perceived as threats to his innate genius rather than problems to solve. He even admitted later he didn't fulfill his absolute potential because of it.
And there was that entitlement piece too.
Oh, yeah. He told a story about being #1 in the world and absolutely screaming at his agent Gary because he didn't like the texture of the sawdust they used on court. He felt his fixed status as #1 gave him the right to abuse people.
Wow. Okay, now contrast that with Michael Jordan.
Jordan is almost the archetype of the growth mindset champion. He always talked about mental toughness, heart, practice, overcoming obstacles. He never rested on his laurels.
People called him a genius, a natural.
And he worked relentlessly to improve that genius. His former coach famously said he was a genius who constantly wants to upgrade his genius. He was known for identifying his weaknesses, his defense early on, his ball handling, refining his jump shot, and then drilling them mercilessly in the offseason.
So he saw flaws not as signs of limitation, but as opportunities for growth.
Exactly. When people were calling him God in person after a comeback, he pushed back, saying something like he was a human being like everyone else. He always brought it back to the work, the effort, the process.
Even someone legendary like Babe Ruth, often seen as the ultimate natural.
Yeah, but even the Bambino had to work at it. He wasn't always the consistent powerhouse. Early in his career, he could be streaky, prone to slumps.
Really?
Yep. There was a season, 1925, where he was pretty awful, overweight, looked like he might be washed up.
What happened?
He made a conscious decision, a growth mindset decision. He committed himself to getting in shape. He undertook really rigorous off-season training and practice routines, focusing on conditioning and discipline.
And the result?
It led directly to the best, most sustained hitting streak of his entire career. He batted something like .354 for the next 6 seasons. He refused to let that temporary slump, that fixed assessment of being washed up, define him. He put in the work and reinvented himself. And these mindsets don't just shape individual athletes or students, they profoundly shape entire organizations, especially through leadership.
Right, the mindset at the top kind of sets the tone for everyone else.
Absolutely, it creates the whole culture. You see this really stark contrast in business between, say, fixed mindset superstar CEOs and growth mindset leaders focused on building capacity.
Let's take an example. Albert Dunlap, Chainsaw Al.
Oh, yeah. Dunlap was practically a caricature of the fixed mindset in the executive suite. He saw himself as this larger-than-life superstar. His entire focus was on proving his inherent genius through dramatic short-term results.
Primarily boosting the stock price, right?
Exactly. That was the main metric that validated his fixed talent. He famously dismissed the idea of considering stakeholders, employees, the community, suppliers, calling it ridiculous. Why? Because their well-being couldn't easily be boiled down to a single number proving his brilliance.
So it was all about him, his ego, his immediate success, not the long-term health or growth of the company itself.
Pretty much. He even admitted he'd get bored with companies quickly after he'd fixed them, often through massive layoffs, hence the nickname, and proven his point. It wasn't about nurturing something, it was about demonstrating his fixed superiority, which ultimately contributed to disasters like the one at Sunbeam.
And that kind of leadership creates a specific kind of work environment, doesn't it?
Definitely. A culture often based on fear and judgment. If the leader needs to be the smartest person in the room, what happens to talented employees?
They become threats.
Often, yes. Research suggests fixed mindset managers can sometimes unconsciously target their most competent team members because those people challenge the manager's sense of unique, fixed superiority. They need to maintain their position at the top of the perceived talent hierarchy.
And how do they maintain that? Through things like humiliation.
That can be part of it. That anecdote you hear about a boss throwing an orange juice container at an employee, it's shocking, but it illustrates that dynamic.
Yeah.
Using fear, judgment, public criticism, it keeps everyone else focused on simply looking good, avoiding mistakes, and not challenging the boss. It absolutely kills learning, risk-taking, and innovation.
Okay, so that's the fixed mindset leadership model. What's the alternative? Lou Gerstner at IBM.
Perfect contrast. Gerstner was brought into IBM when it was really struggling. It had this very ingrained culture of, fixed mindset elitism, smugness, resting on past laurels, internal silos.
Believing they were inherently superior because they were IBM.
Right. Gerstner came in as a self-proclaimed growth mindset guy. And what did he focus on? Not just quick financial fixes, though Wall Street wanted that. He focused relentlessly on changing the culture, fostering teamwork, breaking down those silos, demanding open communication and debate, rewarding learning and collaboration. He knew IBM couldn't succeed with one genius at the top dictating everything. He needed to unlock the collective potential, convince thousands of people they could learn, adapt, and grow together.
Even when the stock market folks were impatient.
Especially then. He stuck to his guns, focused on that cultural transformation, and within a few years, IBM had turned around and was leading its field again. The genius became the collaborative learning culture he built, not just himself.
That's a powerful difference. And these dynamics, they play out in our personal lives too, right?
Especially in relationships.
Oh, absolutely. Mindset dictates so much about how we approach love, conflict, and partnership.
How does the fixed mindset look in romance? It often comes with this expectation of instant, perfect, perpetual compatibility, the meant-to-be myth.
Soulmates, love at first sight, effortless connection.
Kind of. The underlying belief is that if it's real love, it should just work without significant effort. The relationship itself is seen as a fixed entity. If problems arise, if you have to actually work on communication or compromise.
The conclusion is, it wasn't meant to be.
Exactly. Because effort feels like proof that the fundamental connection, the fixed meant-to-be-ness, isn't actually there. This can lead to people rejecting potentially great partners over relatively minor things.
Like the Penelope example, dismissing guys for wearing white shoes or giving a tacky gift.
Yeah, those small imperfections are seen as signs of fundamental incompatibility, fatal flaws in the perfect match picture. Effort feels like a relationship red flag.
Okay, so the growth mindset in love.
It starts from a different place. It understands that both partners are capable of change and development, and therefore the relationship itself can grow and evolve. Compatibility isn't just found, it's built.
Through work.
Through work. Through communication, learning about each other, navigating conflicts constructively. The ideal shifts from that passive fairy tale they lived happily ever after to a more active, earned reality. They worked happily ever after.
That makes sense. But what happens when conflict does arise? Because it always does. How do the mindsets differ then?
The fixed mindset often defaults to competition and blame, focused on those perceived fixed traits.
Competition within the relationship.
Yeah. It can become this subtle or not so subtle contest. Who's smarter? Who's more talented? Who's more emotionally aware? who's right.
That sounds stressful, like the story of Cynthia, the scientist.
Right. She felt this intense need to prove she was equal or superior to her partners in their areas of expertise, acting, music, cooking. Her constant need to compete, driven by her own fixed mindset insecurities about needing to be brilliant at everything, ultimately drove them away. They needed space to just be themselves without constant evaluation.
And the blame part. Fixed mindset blames the partner's character.
Often, yes. Conflict gets framed as evidence of the partner's permanent flaws. He never takes things seriously. She's always critical. He's just inherently lazy. These are character assassinations, judgments about fixed traits.
Whereas the growth mindset would focus more
on the specific behavior or the situation. I feel hurt when you say things like that. We seem to be arguing about chores a lot lately. How can we handle this better? Maybe we're both stressed and need to talk when we're calmer. It separates the person from the problem.
Like Ted and Karen, who broke their negative cycle.
Exactly. They were caught in that fixed mindset trap of calling each other names, blaming character, you're a slob, you're a nag. That breakthrough came when they consciously decided to stop the angry labels and focus on action.
So Ted, instead of yelling about the messy house,
he asked himself, what's the mature, helpful thing to do here? And he just started cleaning up, framing it as mutual support, not a judgment on her character. That shift from judging fixed traits to taking growth-oriented action changed everything for them.
It's amazing how that small shift in focus makes such a big difference. And this dynamic of judgment versus growth, it even shows up in things like bullying, right?
Absolutely. Bullying is almost pure fixed mindset in action. It's all about establishing superiority through judgment.
I'm popular, athletic, rich, and you're not, therefore I'm better than you.
Precisely. It's about putting others down into fixed categories to boost one's own sense of status and self-esteem. But here's what's fascinating. How victims respond based on their own mindset.
Okay.
Victims with a growth mindset were found to process the bullying differently. They didn't necessarily internalize the bully's judgment as a true reflection of their own worth.
How did they see it?
They often reframed it as the bully's problem, like, this person has psychological issues, or they must feel bad about themselves to act like this. It wasn't about their fixed inadequacy, it was about the bully's issues.
And did that change how they reacted?
It often did. Instead of just feeling crushed, some even developed goals, like trying to educate the bullies or help them become better people. It's that growth orientation, again, seeing potential for change, even in the aggressor.
Like Brooks Brown, the Columbine survivor you mentioned.
Yeah, he explicitly rejected the fixed judgments of the people who bullied him. Instead of letting it define him negatively, he channeled his experience into understanding and addressing the roots of bullying, aiming to use your mind and make things better. He refused to be trapped by their fixed mindset assessment of him.
Okay, this is all incredibly insightful. But I can imagine someone listening, maybe someone who identifies with the fixed mindset, thinking, okay, but I've succeeded. I have shown I'm smart or talented, so why do I still feel this pressure? Why can't I just relax?
That's a really common and important question. And the answer, according to the research, is kind of unsettling. The fixed mindset isn't really secure in its belief in its own talent.
What do you mean?
Deep down, there's often this lingering, gnawing fear that the talent isn't real, or it's limited, or the last success was just luck, a fluke. That maybe, underneath it all, they aren't actually that smart or talented.
So the constant need to prove it again and again is actually driven by insecurity, by the fear of being exposed.
Exactly. It needs continuous external validation to keep that fear at bay. It's a defense mechanism. Relaxing feels dangerous because the perceived inadequacy might surface.
That sounds like a terrible way to live.
Yeah.
Constantly running from that fear.
Exhausting. But here's the really hopeful part. Mindsets aren't permanent. They are beliefs, and beliefs can be changed.
So you're not stuck in a fixed mindset forever.
Absolutely not. The research is very clear on this. In fact, sometimes simply learning about the two mindsets, just understanding how they work, can start to cause a significant shift.
Just the awareness itself.
It can be a powerful catalyst. And beyond awareness, there are specific interventions that have proven really effective, especially in education.
Like teaching kids about the brain.
Exactly. Programs often called things like brainology. They teach students directly about neuroplasticity, the fact that the brain isn't fixed, that it physically changes and grows stronger, forming new connections when you challenge it and learn new things.
It's telling kids, your brain is like a muscle. The harder you work it, the stronger it gets.
Essentially, yes, but often with more detail about neurons and connections, and the results are remarkable.
What happens?
Students who get this training start to see effort differently. They understand that struggling isn't a sign they're dumb, it's the feeling of their brain growing. They become more motivated, more willing to ask for help, less afraid of challenges.
And does it affect their actual grades?
Significantly, especially in subjects perceived as difficult, like math. Their grades tend to improve because they're no longer avoiding the hard stuff, they're leaning into it as a way to get smarter.
Okay, this leads straight into a huge area. Praise. How we praise kids or employees or anyone. This seems critical for fostering one mindset or the other.
It's absolutely crucial, and the research here is some of the most striking and definitive in the field. It boils down to, what are you praising?
Meaning?
Are you praising the person's innate ability, their fixed trait? Or are you praising the process, the effort, the strategies they used?
Let's break that down.
Yes.
What happens when you praise ability? Like saying, wow, you solved that puzzle so quickly, you must be really smart.
That feels good in the moment, right? But it's actually quite dangerous psychologically. That kind of ability praise pushes the person directly into a fixed mindset. They internalize the message. Being smart means doing things quickly and easily. The goal becomes looking smart. So what happens next time you offer them a choice between an easy task and a challenging one they might learn from but could possibly fail at?
They'll choose the easy one.
Yeah.
To keep looking smart.
Overwhelmingly, yes. They reject the learning opportunity because it carries the risk of failure, which would disprove their smart label. And even worse, when these ability-praised kids do encounter difficulty later, their performance tends to plummet. They lose confidence quickly and give up easily because the struggle itself feels like proof they aren't smart after all.
Wow. Okay, so what's the alternative? Process praise.
Exactly. This means praising the things the person did. The effort, the strategies, the focus, the perseverance, the improvement.
So instead of, you're so smart, you'd say.
Things like, wow, you worked really hard on that puzzle, or I liked how you tried different approaches until you found one that worked, or you really stuck with it even when it got tough, that's great, or you studied effectively for that test and your improvement shows.
And what does that kind of praise do?
It keeps the focus on things the person can control, their actions, their strategies, their effort. It reinforces the idea that success comes from process, not just innate talent. These process-praised kids are much more likely to choose challenging tasks because they see them as opportunities to learn and get better.
And when they hit difficulty?
They tend to persist longer, stay more motivated, and actually enjoy the challenge more. Their performance often improves after setbacks because they see effort as the way forward. They develop what researchers call mastery goals, wanting to learn and get better, rather than just performance goals, wanting to look good.
This is so important for parents, teachers, managers, everyone, really. And it applies to handling failure too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do you respond when someone does fail?
Yes, constructive feedback during failure is critical. Let's go back to that story of Elizabeth, the 9-year-old gymnast who didn't win a ribbon at her first meet.
Right. What are the wrong ways her parents could have responded?
Well, they could have lied. Oh, honey, you were the best one out there. That teaches her not to trust her own judgment or their feedback.
Okay, what else?
They could have blamed others. You were robbed, the judges were unfair. That teaches her to make excuses and not take responsibility for her performance.
Right.
They could have devalued the activity. Who cares about gymnastics anyway? It's not that important. That teaches her that if you're not immediately good at something, it's not worth pursuing. All of these are fixed mindset traps.
So, what did her growth-minded dad actually do?
He combined empathy with honesty and a focus on process. He acknowledged her disappointment, validated her feelings, but then he told her the truth, gently. You know, Elizabeth, you haven't really earned it yet.
Ooh, that sounds harsh, maybe.
It could be, but look how he framed it. There were many girls there who've been in gymnastics longer than you and who've worked a lot harder than you have so far. If this is something you really want, then it's something you'll really have to work for.
I see. He didn't say you're not talented. He said your current level of effort and experience isn't enough yet. But if you want it, work is the path.
Exactly. He didn't judge her fixed worth. He highlighted the gap between her current process and the goal and showed her the way to bridge it through effort.
And what happened with Elizabeth?
She apparently took it to heart. She went home and started practicing her weakest routines over and over. The next meet, she dominated, winning multiple ribbons. The lesson wasn't, I'm bad. It was, I need to work harder, smarter.
So the key takeaway for parents, coaches, leaders is Don't judge character, teach process.
Precisely. A mistake or misbehavior isn't a sign of a permanent flaw. Bad kid, incompetent employee. It's a learning opportunity. How can we do better next time? What strategy needs to change?
Okay, this is all making sense, but changing your own ingrained mindset feels hard. How can someone listening right now actually start making this shift? Is there a practical plan?
Yes, the research offers a pretty concrete 4-step approach, often leveraging something called implementation intentions, basically. Pre-planning your response.
Okay, step 1.
Step 1. Confront your triggers. Become consciously aware of what situations tend to push your fixed mindset buttons. Is it getting criticism? Seeing someone else succeed easily? Facing a big, daunting challenge? Just noticing the trigger is the first crucial step.
Got it. Awareness. Step 2.
Step 2. Name your fixed mindset persona. This sounds a bit quirky, but it's powerful. Give that negative judging voice in your head a name, like Gertrude or George or whatever feels right.
Why name it?
It helps you externalize it. It's not you, it's Gertrude acting up again. It allows you to observe it more objectively and talk back to it. You hear about professionals doing this, like an executive realizing his critical, bossy moments were his Dwayne persona taking over.
And that helps separate the behavior from the self.
Exactly. And it helps others understand too, like the team member who realized her anxious, cowering reaction was her Aine persona responding to Dwayne. Naming it makes it manageable, less like a fundamental part of who you are.
Okay. Awareness, naming the persona.
Yeah.
Step 3.
Step 3. Concrete planning, implementation intentions. This is key. When you anticipate a trigger, or when the fixed persona shows up, have a specific pre-planned growth mindset response ready. Use the when, where, how format.
Give me an example.
Okay. When my fixed persona, Gertrude, tells me I shouldn't try that new project because I might fail, trigger persona, then at my desk, where, I will remind myself that challenges are opportunities to learn, and I will list 3 concrete first steps I can take. How?
So you're programming your response in advance.
Exactly. It makes it much more likely you'll follow through with the growth action instead of getting stuck in the fixed reaction. The research shows these implementation intentions are incredibly effective, even making people more likely to act constructively when they feel bad, because the plan is already in place.
That's powerful. Okay, final step.
That's right.
Step 4.
Step 4. Maintain momentum. This isn't a one-and-done fix. It's an ongoing process. You need to keep cultivating the growth mindset. Regularly ask yourself questions like, what opportunities for learning and growth can I seek out today? Or, what do I need to do to keep moving forward, even if it's challenging?
So it's about building a continuous habit of growth-oriented thinking and action.
Yes, it's about actively disproving that fixed mindset fear, the fear that your abilities are limited, or that success was just a fluke, by consistently engaging in the process of learning, effort, and improvement. So when you pull it all together, what we've really been talking about today is this incredibly powerful, yet often subtle belief system that fundamentally shapes almost everything: how you see challenges, how you react to setbacks, how you lead, how you love.
It really boils down to a choice, doesn't it? A direction.
Yeah.
On one side, you have the fixed mindset, and that path tends to lead towards, well, avoiding challenges because they feel threatening.
Getting defensive when faced with obstacles or criticism, ignoring valuable feedback because it feels like a personal attack.
Feeling threatened or envious when others succeed because it makes you feel diminished. And ultimately, maybe plateauing, maybe not quite reaching what you could have.
Right. Then there's the other path, the growth mindset. And that's characterized by almost the opposite.
Embracing challenges, seeing them as opportunities to stretch and learn.
Persisting when things get tough, viewing setbacks not as proof of inability, but as, well, informative, like that kid said. Seeing effort as necessary, even desirable, as the path to getting better.
Actively seeking out and learning from criticism. And finding lessons and inspiration rather than threats in the success of other people.
And because of all that, this path, the growth mindset path, tends to lead to higher and higher levels of achievement over time. Not because of some magical increase in innate talent, but because the process itself, the learning, the striving, the resilience, continuously expands your capabilities.
It's like that quote from Alex Rodriguez you mentioned, the baseball player. Pretty straightforward. You either go one way or the other.
It really is a fundamental choice point we encounter again and again. Changing deeply held beliefs is definitely not easy. It takes conscious effort, awareness, practice.
But the payoff seems immense. A richer life, maybe? More courageous? More open to what's possible?
I think so. The growth mindset doesn't promise an easy life, but it offers a way to navigate the inevitable difficulties with resilience and purpose. It keeps showing you a path forward, a way into the future, even when you stumble.
So, the final thought for everyone listening. That choice of direction.
Yeah.
Fixed or growth. Stagnation or expansion. It really is yours to make. But that growth path, it's always available. We are jumping into a subject today that feels, well, deceptively simple. Just a single belief you hold about yourself.
That's right. And this belief, your mindset, it's like this quiet engine running in the background.
But it guides so much, doesn't it? Your approach to effort, how you handle failure, even relationships. It often ends up determining whether you fulfill your potential.
Absolutely. So our deep dive today is really designed to give you a precise understanding of the two main mindsets, fixed and growth.
We want to go beyond just defining them.
Exactly. We want to show you, using some really compelling research and real-world stories, just how profound and, frankly, pervasive their effect is on pretty much every aspect of achievement.
Think of it as maybe a critical shortcut to self-awareness, maybe even improvement.
That's a good way to put it. And, the research itself, where this all started, has a fantastic origin story.
Right, it didn't just appear out of nowhere. The researchers began with a pretty standard psychological idea, didn't they?
Yeah, the basic assumption was, okay, you face failure and then you either cope with it or you don't. That was kind of the accepted framework.
So they set up this study, brought kids into a lab.
Yep. Gave them some easy puzzles first, build up confidence, And then they introduced puzzles that were way too hard, deliberately too difficult to solve.
And they expected, what, tears? Frustration?
Pretty much. A whole range of stress reactions. Maybe some kids would just give up gracefully. Others might, have a bit of a meltdown. Standard stuff.
What actually happened just blew that model apart, didn't it?
Completely. It was honestly shocking to the researchers. The kids who showed what we now call the growth mindset, they didn't just cope with the impossible puzzles, they almost celebrated them.
That's the amazing part. One 10-year-old boy, right? Totally stuck on a puzzle.
Yeah, and instead of getting frustrated, he pulls his chair closer, rubs his hands together like some kind of, eager scientist.
And actually says,
cried out, apparently with real joy, "I love a challenge."
Wow. And there was another one.
Another kid, maybe sweating a bit from trying so hard, looks up with this look of just pure curiosity and says, I was hoping this would be informative.
Informative, not I'm failing.
Exactly. They saw the difficulty not as a judgment on them, on their intelligence, but as data, as instruction.
Yeah.
They weren't just resilient, they were actively thriving on the difficulty.
And that's what revealed these two fundamentally different ways of thinking about ability. The first one being the fixed mindset.
Right. The fixed mindset is the belief that your basic qualities, your intelligence, your talents, maybe even your personality are just static. They're fixed traits, set in stone.
And if you believe that, then your main goal in life becomes, what? Proving it.
Constantly proving it. Validation is everything. You have this consuming need to show that you have these good traits, look smart, and crucially, never ever look dumb. That's the absolute priority.
Okay, so that's fixed. What's the alternative?
That's the growth mindset, and it's founded on a totally different belief that those qualities you cherish, like intelligence or skill, they aren't fixed at all. They can be cultivated, developed.
Through what?
Through dedication, through smart effort, through training, through learning from mistakes. This mindset naturally creates a passion for learning, for improvement.
So failure isn't the end of the story.
Not even close. Failure is just feedback. It's essential information. It's actually the fuel you need for the next step of growth. It's a completely different orientation to challenges.
Okay, let's dig into this a bit more. It feels like we're tapping into that age-old debate, nature versus nurture.
It really is at the historical core of it. For centuries, people have looked for, physical signs of fixed limits.
Like phrenology, measuring bumps on the head, or craniology.
Exactly. Trying to assert that traits were unalterable, often, frankly, to justify existing social hierarchies. And even today, sometimes the way we talk about genetics can slip into that fixed mindset, suggesting everything's hardwired, immutable destiny.
But there was a very interesting historical counterpoint, wasn't there? From someone you wouldn't expect.
Absolutely, a really surprising figure. Alfred Binet, the inventor of the IQ test.
Wait, the IQ test? That feels like the ultimate symbol of a fixed, unchanging number defining someone's potential.
I know, it's ironic, isn't it? But that was the complete opposite of Binet's original intention. He designed the test back in the early 1900s because the French government asked him to.
Why? What was the goal?
To identify children in Paris schools who were falling behind academically. It was purely diagnostic.
So not to label them permanently?
No, not at all. His purpose was to pinpoint weaknesses so that they could create specific, tailored educational programs to help those kids to get them back on track, as he put it.
He actually believed intelligence could change.
Explicitly. He argued strongly that practice, the right education, methodological guidance, these things could bring about fundamental, even profound changes in a person's intelligence. He was firmly in the growth camp.
So why did his test get turned into this fixed measure, especially in places like the US, if that wasn't his intent?
Well, you could argue the fixed mindset is just easier, especially for institutions. It's simply to categorize a child, label them low potential, put them on a certain track, than it is to invest the resources, the creativity, the sheer effort required to develop programs that truly believe every child can change and grow.
So we kind of chose the interpretation that fit the desire for quick categorization.
It seems that way. That desire for a definitive label feeds right into how the fixed mindset views potential itself. It believes potential can be known, like right now, measured by a single test, assessed by an expert.
And then just projected out into the future as this fixed line.
Exactly. And that leads to some really, frankly, bizarre judgments that people make, like that anecdote about Joseph P. Kennedy.
The patriarch of the Kennedy family. What did he do?
He apparently told a young Morton Downey Jr., who later became a pretty famous TV host, that he'd be a total failure.
Based on what? Some deep insight. A test result.
Based on his socks and shoes. Downey was wearing, quote, red socks and brown shoes to some fancy nightclub.
Seriously? That was it?
That was it. Kennedy apparently said something like, I don't know anybody I've ever met wearing red socks and brown shoes who ever succeeded. That is pure fixed mindset, taking one tiny irrelevant data point and using it to forecast someone's entire future, acting like a prophet based on footwear.
Wow. Okay, so how does the growth mindset see potential then? It must be completely different.
Totally different. It's much more modest, but ultimately, I think, much more powerful. They don't believe anyone can just wish themselves into becoming Einstein or Beethoven, obviously.
It's not about magic.
No, but they firmly believe that a person's true potential is fundamentally unknown and probably unknowable.
Meaning you just can't predict the ceiling.
Exactly. It's impossible to foresee what someone might achieve with years, maybe decades of intense passion, hard work, and the right kind of training. The future isn't predetermined.
And you see this borne out in reality, don't you? We love the idea of the natural talent, but so many incredibly successful people weren't child prodigies.
Not at all. Darwin and Tolstoy, apparently considered pretty ordinary kids. Ben Hogan, arguably the greatest golfer ever in terms of ball striking. Early observers said he was uncoordinated, even clumsy.
He wasn't born with that perfect swing.
Far from it. Or think about Cindy Sherman, a hugely important contemporary artist. She actually failed her first photography course.
Failed it.
Yep. Didn't have that fixed talent right out of the gate. But she obviously had the drive to learn, to practice, to develop her skills. These stories really challenge that idea that potential is just there, fully formed from the start.
Which brings us to a really key difference, how the two mindsets even define being smart. For the fixed mindset, it's all about effortless perfection.
Exactly. Researchers ask people, when do you feel smart? And the fixed mindset folks, they consistently tied it to things outside their control or things being easy.
Like what?
They'd say things like, when I don't make any mistakes, or when I finish something really fast and it's perfect, or this one's very telling, when something is easy for me, but other people can't do it.
So it's about comparison and flawlessness.
Right. The goal is proving you already are smart. If you have to struggle, if you mess up, then you don't feel smart anymore. The feeling is fragile.
But the growth-minded people had a totally different definition.
Completely different. They shifted the focus entirely from validation to the process of learning.
So they felt smart when?
They felt smart when it's really hard, and I try really hard, and I can do something I couldn't do before, or when I work on something for a long time and I start to figure it out.
It's about the effort and the progress?
Precisely. The feeling of intelligence for them is tied to overcoming a challenge, to the actual experience of getting better over time. It's not tied to never making mistakes.
That really highlights the tragedy of the fixed mindset, doesn't it? If you need to be perfect immediately, then the whole idea of learning, which involves struggle and mistakes, becomes threatening.
Deeply threatening. It undermines the very foundation of their self-worth.
Okay, so if that need for immediate perfection is so strong, what happens when someone with a fixed mindset inevitably encounters failure? Or even just a minor setback?
The psychological impact is often way out of proportion to the actual event. It's not just disappointment, it can trigger this feeling of utter failure and paralysis.
Why so extreme?
Because in the fixed mindset, a setback isn't just about the event, it's interpreted as a measurement, a final verdict on their fixed, inherent ability or worth. The failure becomes proof that they aren't smart or talented after all.
There was a study about this, right? Using pretty minor everyday problems.
Yeah, a simple vignette study. They presented people with a scenario. You get a C+ on a midterm, you get a parking ticket, and a friend kind of brushes you off unexpectedly. You know, annoying things, but not life-altering crises.
Right, stuff that happens.
But the fixed mindset individuals reacted with this extreme self-condemnation. They started labeling themselves in really harsh ways.
Like what kind of labels?
Things like, I feel like a reject, I'm a total failure, I'm an idiot, even I'm slime.
Slime. Over a C+ and a parking ticket.
It sounds extreme, but it shows how the minor failure wasn't seen as separate from them. It became who they were. It confirms that fixed mindset fear that one test or one evaluation can measure you forever.
And what did they say they'd do in response? Did it lead to constructive action?
Quite the opposite. This is where the paralysis really kicks in. Their coping mechanisms weren't about solving the problems at all. They were about escaping the feeling of being judged, avoiding any future situation where they might be measured again.
So things like?
They'd say things like, I wouldn't bother putting so much time and effort into anything again, which is basically self-sabotage, right?
Yeah, lowering the stakes so failure doesn't hurt as much.
Exactly. Or simply, do nothing. Stay in bed, get drunk, pick a fight with somebody. Even, bizarrely, go into my closet and sit there.
Wow, the common theme is just shutting down, hiding.
Total inactivity and often self-destruction. The goal is to get out of the spotlight that revealed their perceived flaw.
And people can carry this feeling, this sense of being defined by an early failure for years, can't they? Like that story of Loretta.
Oh, absolutely. She was placed in a, quote, non-elite kindergarten class based on one assessment when she was 5 years old. And she carried that belief, that label, into adulthood, thinking it defined her limits forever.
That's heartbreaking. And when this kind of thinking gets tied up with professional identity, the results can be even more devastating, like the case of Chef Bernard Lusso.
A truly tragic example. Here's a chef at the absolute pinnacle of his profession. 3 Michelin stars, world-renowned.
The highest honor.
Right. But then he lost just 2 points in a different food guide, the Gulp Malao, and there were rumors circulating, just rumors that he might lose one of his 3 Michelin stars.
And his reaction?
He committed suicide.
Is just unbelievable. It wasn't financial ruin, was it?
No, not primarily. It seems to have been the psychological devastation of losing that fixed, perfect identity. The label was everything. When the label was threatened, his entire sense of self seemed to crumble. It possessed him.
Okay, so that's the crushing weight of the fixed mindset. How did the growth-minded people react to those same minor setbacks in the vignette study? The C+ Sora, the parking ticket.
Well, they weren't happy about it, obviously. They felt upset, maybe annoyed, but their energy didn't get channeled into self-blame or labeling.
Where did it go?
Towards action, towards strategy. They were immediately thinking about what to do next.
So their responses were more like?
Concrete, practical things. Okay, I need to work harder on my next paper. I should probably talk to the teacher to see what went wrong. I need to be more careful where I park next time. I should find out what's going on with my friend, why they brushed me off.
They saw it as a signal to adjust strategy, not a judgment of their worth.
Exactly. The distress was a cue to learn or change behavior, not proof of a permanent flaw.
There's a great example of this with a parent's response, isn't there? Little Elizabeth, the gymnast.
Oh yeah, that's a fantastic illustration. Elizabeth was 9, lost her first big gymnastics meet, and was absolutely devastated. Heartbroken.
Now, a typical fixed mindset parent might try to protect her feelings, right? Say the judges were unfair, or tell her she was robbed.
Right, give her a kind of phony boast.
Oh.
Which actually reinforces the idea that winning is about innate talent, not effort, and that failure is something to make excuses for.
But her father took a different approach.
He did. He offered what the source calls compassionate candor, rooted in that growth philosophy. He acknowledged her disappointment, but then he told her, essentially, that she hadn't really earned the win yet.
Yeah, that sounds tough, but honest.
Honest and constructive. He pointed out that the other girls had been practicing longer, and she needed to work harder, specifically on the routines where she was weaker. He framed the loss not as a final verdict, but as a reflection of her current level of preparation.
And how did Elizabeth respond to that?
It motivated her. Instead of wallowing, she started spending extra time practicing, really focusing on improving those weak spots.
And the result?
She became the overall champion at the next big regional meet. The focus on effort and specific practice paid off. She learned that failure wasn't a dead end, but a starting point for getting better.
We should also touch on that phenomenon of the really talented person who ends up self-sabotaging, like those reporters, Janet Cook and Stephen Glass.
Oh, yeah. Tragic cases in a different way. These were people seen as precocious stars, incredibly gifted writers, but they ended up fabricating articles.
Why would they do that with all that talent?
It seems they were victims of the pressure created by the fixed mindset. They had this identity as natural geniuses, and the pressure to maintain that image, to always be brilliant without apparent effort, became overwhelming.
So admitting they didn't know something, or needed to do more research, felt like a failure.
Exactly. They feared that asking questions, doing the slow, painstaking work of verification, would expose them as frauds, as not really being the fixed stars everyone thought they were. Stephen Glass apparently said something like, "We were stars, and that was what mattered."
So they chose the shortcut, cheating to produce the brilliant result immediately.
It seems so. They chose fabrication over the honest, potentially messy, hard work of learning and reporting accurately. The fear of looking imperfect was greater than the commitment to the process.
Doesn't that say something about our culture, though? That we sometimes reward that appearance of effortless genius so much that it actually incentivizes cutting corners.
I think it absolutely does. When a culture prizes the result above all else, and especially prizes the appearance of effortless brilliance, it creates an environment where admitting struggle or needing help feels incredibly risky, almost like career suicide in some fields.
Whereas the growth mindset makes it okay to be imperfect, to be learning.
Yes, because the focus shifts. It takes the existential threat out of making mistakes. It allows you to focus on the task itself, on the process of getting better, rather than constantly managing the perception of your innate talent. And sports, wow, talk about a high-stakes environment where you really see this clash between mindsets play out, especially that whole debate. Is it raw talent or is it mental toughness and hard work?
Absolutely. Take someone like John McEnroe in tennis. Incredible talent, obviously. A force of nature.
For sure. But he's almost the poster child for the fixed mindset athlete, isn't he? He himself said he believed talent was basically everything. He admitted he didn't really love the process of learning or practicing.
And you saw in matches, right? When things got tough, when the momentum shifted against him, he could just fold. Mentally.
Yeah, he struggled with adversity. And despite being #1 in the world for 4 straight years, he's been quite open in saying he didn't actually fulfill his potential.
And that fixed belief in his own superior talent seemed to lead to this huge sense of entitlement, too.
Oh, definitely. It made his inner world really turbulent, often focused on blaming external things. Remember that famous story about him screaming at his agent, Gary?
Over the sawdust.
Over the coarseness of the sawdust he used for his hands, knocking the can over, demanding Gary get him coarser stuff right now.
Yeah.
He acted like his genius status meant the entire world, down to the texture of sawdust, had to be perfect for him, and that people around him should just grovel.
It's such a stark contrast to someone like Michael Jordan, universally seen as this incredible natural talent, Superman.
Right, but Jordan himself constantly pushed back against that idea. He'd always say things like, "I'm a human being like everyone else." He actively refuted the notion that his success was just preordained talent.
He was famous for his work ethic, wasn't he?
Relentless. Absolutely relentless. He was constantly identifying weaknesses in his own game, maybe his defense early on, or his ball handling, or even developing that fadeaway jumper later. He practiced doggedly.
He didn't just rely on talent.
No way. One of his coaches had that great line, calling him a genius who constantly wants to upgrade his genius. For Jordan, success came from mental toughness, from heart, from effort. He showed that even someone with immense gifts reaches their peak through intentional, grueling work.
And then there's that really interesting story about Billy Beane, amazing athlete, but struggled as a player before he became the famous Moneyball executive.
Yeah, Bean's story is fascinating. As a player, he had all the physical tools, huge talent. But the source says he just didn't know how to fail.
What does that mean in practice?
Every time he struck out, every time he made a mistake at a bat, he apparently just went to pieces emotionally. He couldn't handle the imperfection.
And he compared himself to a teammate.
Yeah.
Lenny Dykstra.
Yeah, Lenny Dykstra.
Yeah.
Physically, maybe not as gifted as Bean, but Bean observed that Dykstra had, in his words, no concept of failure. Dykstra would strike out and it just wouldn't faze him. He'd shrug it off, maybe learn something, and be right back up there ready for the next pitch. He had that growth resilience. And Bean eventually realized that the mindset was the crucial difference for succeeding consistently at the professional level, more so than just the raw physical talent.
Okay, let's take that idea of entitlement, McEnroe wanting the perfect sawdust, and see how it plays out in leadership. Because the fixed mindset leader expects a similar kind of superiority in the boardroom, right?
Absolutely. Fixed mindset leaders are often obsessed with proving their own personal genius, their inherent superiority.
Yeah.
Think of someone like Albert Dunlap, Chainsaw Al.
Right, famous for dramatic turnarounds, but also massive layoffs.
And famous for his ego. He literally compared himself to Michael Jordan and Bruce Springsteen. His entire focus seemed to be on shareholder profits as the only yardstick for his own value, his own greatness.
He famously dismissed the idea of stakeholders, didn't he? Like employees, the community.
Yep. Openly rejected it. Called it the most ridiculous term heard in boardrooms these days. For him, it was all about boosting the stock price to prove he was a superstar.
So short-term, flashy results were key.
Yes, like the drastic cuts and sell-offs at Sunbeam. Those things gave him quick, quantifiable wins to maintain his image. He neglected long-term health, investment in people, or building a sustainable culture. He admitted feeling this constant need to prove and reprove myself. His leadership was about polishing his own statue, not growing the garden.
So how does a growth mindset leader approach things differently? Like Lou Gerstner at IBM.
Gerstner's turnaround of IBM in the 90s is a classic example. IBM was this giant, deeply entrenched in a very fixed, elitist culture. They'd become stagnant, stopped innovating.
And Gerstner came in as an outsider.
Right, and he was described as an avowed growth mindsetter. Wall Street, the business press, they were really skeptical at first. His initial moves were slow, focused on culture change, not immediate flashy results. The stock price didn't jump right away.
So he faced pressure for quick fixes.
Huge pressure. But he resisted the urge to do something dramatic just to boost his own ego or appease the market short term. He focused on the long game, changing the core culture, fostering teamwork and collaboration, investing in development. He believed the company, and crucially its people, could grow and adapt.
And it worked. Eventually.
It did. It led IBM back to tremendous success, but it took years of that steady, growth-oriented effort. It wasn't about one genius move, it was about cultivating the whole ecosystem.
You know, another piece of this fixed mindset is that fear of being overshadowed by others. If talent is fixed, then someone else's success kind of takes away from yours, right?
Exactly. It fosters this zero-sum thinking, like that weird anecdote from the fishing camp.
Oh yeah, where the researcher catches a big fish?
A big rainbow trout, yeah. And instead of just congratulating her or her husband, the other men at the camp go up to her husband with this sort of fake sympathy, asking him how he was coping with his wife catching a bigger fish than he did.
It's absurd.
Totally absurd, but it perfectly captures that fixed mindset assumption. Her success somehow diminishes his status. It's incredibly toxic for teamwork, for learning from each other.
Which makes the story of Mark O'Mara and Tiger Woods so powerful. O'Mara was a great golfer, but playing alongside Tiger, who was clearly on another level at the time.
Right. O'Mara had a choice. He could feel threatened, diminished, resentful, the fixed mindset reaction, or he could choose the growth mindset path, which is what he did. He decided to learn from Tiger. Instead of letting Woods' incredible skill undermine his own self-worth, he studied him.
What did he study?
His precision, his technique, his focus. O'Mara then took charge of his own game, identified areas where he could improve, and rededicated himself to training and practice.
And it paid off for him, didn't it? Even later in his career.
Massively. This renewed commitment to his own growth process helped him achieve his greatest successes after the age of 40, winning 2 major championships. He turned what could have been a source of intimidation into a catalyst for his own improvement. That's the growth mindset in action.
Okay, shifting gears slightly to education. This is where we hit one of the most, I think, counterintuitive findings, the potential danger of praise. We think praising kids is always good, right?
We do. It feels natural. But the research is really clear and quite startling. praising children for their innate ability for being smart is actually harmful.
Harmful?
Yeah.
How? Saying you're so smart seems like a compliment.
It seems like one, but what it does is push the child directly into a fixed mindset. Suddenly, their core identity becomes being smart.
And the problem with that is?
The problem is they then become terrified of anything that might challenge that identity. They start avoiding difficult tasks, things they might not succeed at immediately, because failure would mean they aren't actually smart after all. It makes them risk-averse.
And the research showed this actually affects performance.
Dramatically. In studies, kids who were praised for their intelligence, you must be smart at this, showed a significant drop in motivation and performance when they were later given harder problems. It was like the praise actually lowered their functional IQ in that challenging situation. They lost confidence because the struggle itself felt like proof they lacked the fixed ability.
Wow. So what's the alternative? How should we praise kids?
The key is process praise. You praise the things the child can actually control. Their effort, the strategies they used, their focus, their perseverance, their improvement.
So instead of, you're so smart, you'd say.
You'd say something like, wow, that's a great score, you must have worked really hard on that. Or, I like the way you tried different approaches until you figured it out. Or, you really stuck with that problem, that's great persistence. It shifts the focus from a fixed trait inside them to the actions they took.
And did that kind of praise have a different effect in the studies?
The complete opposite effect. Kids who received process praise actually showed increased motivation and performance when they faced difficulty. They saw the hard problems not as a threat, but as an opportunity to learn and try new strategies. Their scores often went up because the challenge didn't undermine their identity, it just called for more effort or a different approach.
It makes you think about how often we hear ability praise. There was that letter from a mother.
Yeah, about her 5th grade son. Scored incredibly high on tests, 99th percentile, and his father constantly told him how intelligent he was.
Sounds like a proud dad.
Sure, but the mother noticed a worrying pattern. The boy became really reluctant to take on more difficult work or projects. He'd even hide his work sometimes. Why? Because he was terrified of doing anything that might challenge that overinflated view of his abilities his father had fostered. The praise, meant well, was actually paralyzing him with a fear of failure.
That paralysis, that fear, it translates into personal relationships too, doesn't it? The idea of the perfect relationship.
Oh, absolutely. The fixed mindset often brings this toxic belief into romance. The myth of instant, perfect, and perpetual compatibility.
The meant-to-be idea from movies.
Exactly. The soulmate myth, which implies that if a relationship requires actual work, if you have to communicate through difficulties, navigate conflicts, learn to tolerate imperfections, then it must mean it wasn't meant to be.
So problems are seen as signs of fundamental incompatibility.
Precisely. Instead of seeing conflicts as normal issues to be worked through, fixed mindset partners tend to blame problems on fixed, negative personality traits in the other person. He's just selfish. She's just neurotic. It leads to judgment and contempt rather than problem solving.
Like that example of Penelope, the woman who kept breaking up with seemingly great guys.
Yeah, she'd find someone promising but then dump them over really minor things, a birthday present she thought was tacky or wearing the wrong kind of shoes for the season.
Why? What was the thinking?
Her fixed mindset saw these minor flaws not as quirks or isolated mistakes, but as indicators of a fundamental, unchangeable character defect. If he has bad taste in shoes, he must be fundamentally flawed, therefore, we are not meant to be. There's no room for growth or change.
So the growth mindset relationship is different how? It embraces the work.
It understands that relationships require work. The saying isn't they found happily ever after, it's they worked happily ever after. It assumes partners are capable of learning and growing, that conflicts are opportunities to understand each other better, and that the relationship itself needs active effort, communication, and strategies to thrive.
This seems linked to that idea of entitlement versus partnership.
Very closely linked. John Gottman's research on why relationships fail often points to this fixed mindset entitlement. He found examples, particularly among men in more traditional setups, who just assumed their fixed role, like being the breadwinner, meant the relationship should just work, without them needing to put in effort on communication or domestic partnership.
Like the guys who said, housework, that's a woman's job.
Exactly. They expected their fixed status to be enough. And then they were genuinely surprised when, years later, the emotional connection and intimacy had withered away because they hadn't actively nurtured it. Entitlement assumes growth requires engagement.
That Janet and Phil housewarming party story is such a perfect everyday example of this breakdown.
Isn't it so relatable? Janet does most of the cooking, and she just assumes Phil will naturally step up and help host, mingle, take care of guests.
Makes sense.
But Phil, operating from his own assumption maybe that hosting is Janet's domain, or just not thinking actively about his role, basically just enjoys the party like a guest, doesn't pitch in.
And Janet gets furious.
Understandably, because her unspoken expectation, based on her assumption of partnership, was violated. They weren't on the same page because they hadn't communicated.
They didn't need like a personality transplant.
Yeah, no. They just needed a growth-oriented conversation. The solution they found later was simple but crucial. In the future, things were discussed, not assumed. They learned they had to explicitly define roles and expectations for events like that. They had to treat relationship management as a skill to be practiced, not a magical alignment that just happens.
Okay, we've laid out the differences, the pitfalls of the fixed mindset, the benefits of the growth mindset. But the really hopeful part is this isn't set in stone, right? Mindsets can change.
That's probably the most crucial takeaway. Yes, mindsets are beliefs. They feel like part of our personality, but they absolutely can be changed. And it's also important to remember that most of us aren't purely one or the other.
We're a mix.
Definitely. You might have a growth mindset about, say, learning new work skills, but feel really fixed about your artistic talent or your ability to learn a language. It can vary by domain.
So if someone recognizes they have a fixed mindset in an area where it's holding them back, what's the first step to shifting it?
The first, and maybe the most powerful step, is simply becoming aware of that critical inner voice. You know, the one that pipes up with judgment when you stumble or face a challenge. That fixed mindset persona.
You have to identify it first.
You have to identify it, confront it, maybe even give it a name.
Name it. Like literally give that critical voice a name.
It sounds a bit silly, maybe, but it's a surprisingly effective technique used in workshops. Naming it helps you externalize it. It stops being you, the authoritative truth, and becomes this separate entity, this persona that you can observe and argue with.
What kind of names did people come up with?
All sorts. Executives might call theirs Dwayne or Iani. Students got creative. One young woman named her fixed voice Gertrude, which apparently means strong spear, because her fixed voice was always demanding this unwavering, innate strength and was terrified of any weakness.
Wow. Another one used a relative's name.
Yeah, a student whose trigger was professional rejection named her inner critic Henrietta after her very critical grandmother. It makes that internal monologue concrete.
And does just naming it help?
It's the first step. It creates distance. Then you can recognize when it's talking. Like the Stanford student, S, in the case study. Her fixed persona was Z.
Right, the writer who applied to the student newspaper.
Exactly. She worked incredibly hard on her application essays. Her roommate spent maybe half the time, got accepted. S got rejected.
And what did Z say?
Z just unleashed this torrent of abuse. Stupid, stupid, stupid. How could you even think you were capable? You're a failure. Total fixed mindset condemnation.
That must have been crushing. What did she do? Did she just accept Z's verdict?
That was the critical moment. Z's voice was telling her to hide, to give up, to accept the label of not good enough. But instead, she did what the researchers called an outrageously growth mindset action.
Which was?
She deliberately went against Z's impulse to retreat. She contacted the newspaper again. She asked if they needed writers for any other sections, maybe features or something else. And she offered her services. And they said yes. They needed help, and she got a position. By taking that proactive, problem-solving step, instead of isolating herself in shame, she effectively silenced Z. She chose action over rumination.
So it's about recognizing the voice and then choosing a different action. But that requires more than just willpower, right? It needs a plan.
Absolutely. The fixed mindset often leads to vague intentions like, I'll try harder. That's not enough. A growth-oriented approach requires concrete, specific planning.
Visualizing it.
Yes. The research shows that making a specific plan, answering the questions, when, where, and how will I actually do this, dramatically increases the chances of follow-through. It makes the intention real, commits you to a behavior, not just a feeling.
And this is important even when you're feeling really down. like if you're dealing with depression.
Especially then, this is a really vital point from the source material. The growth mindset acts as a powerful coping tool, even during periods of severe emotional distress.
Oh, so?
College studies found that students with a growth mindset, even when they were clinically depressed and felt absolutely terrible, were more likely to stick to constructive actions.
Like going to class.
Yeah, forcing themselves to go to class, keep up with assignments, follow their study plan, even though they felt wretched. They separated the feeling from the necessary action. The plan was the plan, regardless of mood.
And the benefit of that.
The huge benefit was that when their mood eventually lifted, their academic life wasn't in ruins. They hadn't dug themselves into a deeper hole. It minimized the secondary damage that depression can cause.
So the fixed mindset waits to feel motivated before acting.
Right. I'll study when I feel like it, which might be never when you're depressed.
Whereas the growth mindset says act first, based on the plan, and the feelings might follow.
Exactly. Act your way into the feeling rather than waiting for the feeling to prompt the action.
Let's apply that one more time to sports. That example of this star college quarterback, Heisman winner, who gets to the pros and suddenly struggles.
Big time. Yeah, a classic scenario. The game is way faster, the defenses are smarter, the pressure is immense. Everything that worked before might not be enough.
What's the typical fixed mindset reaction for that player?
Often it's isolation and self-blame. He thinks, my talent should be enough. What's wrong with me? He tries to fix it all by himself, maybe watches endless game film alone, tortures himself over mistakes. He starts feeling like he's no leader, withdraws from teammates, hides in the locker room after bad games.
It becomes a downward spiral.
Totally. But the growth mindset reaction is completely different. It's collaborative, it's adaptive.
How would that look?
The QB recognizes, okay, this isn't a judgment on my inherent talent. This is a huge step up. It's a massive new learning curve. So instead of self-pity, he thinks, I need new strategies.
So he reaches out.
Yes. He actively seeks out the veteran quarterbacks on the team, maybe even on other teams, asks them specific questions. How did you adjust? What were your biggest struggles? How did you work on your weaknesses? He makes the coaches his partners, not his judges. He asks them, show me my errors, help me analyze this, instead of trying to hide his flaws from them. He embraces the challenge as a learning process.
So pulling this all together, it seems like while our culture often romanticizes that idea of the natural, the effortlessly gifted person.
Yeah, we love that myth.
The reality is that sustained success, and maybe even deeper satisfaction, really comes from embracing effort, from cultivating that growth mindset. It comes down to what people in sports call character.
Right. Billie Jean King had that great insight, that eureka moment. She realized a champion isn't just someone who plays well when everything's going right. A true champion is someone who can dig deep, find a way, and raise their game when things aren't quite right, when they're facing adversity. That ability to grow through struggle, that's character.
And there's that fear we touched on, that if you adopt a growth mindset, if you focus on effort, you somehow become ordinary.
Yeah.
Less special.
It's a common fear tied to the fixed mindset's need for innate specialness. But the source argues, and I think convincingly, that the opposite is true. Opening yourself up to growth doesn't make you blend in. It actually allows you to become more fully yourself.
How so?
Because it removes the constraints of having to constantly prove a fixed identity. It frees you up to explore, to learn, to develop your unique potential without fear. The great scientists, artists, leaders we talked about, they weren't copies of each other. They achieved greatness because they engaged in that relentless process of self-cultivation, allowing the full flower of their individuality and potency to emerge. Growth leads to differentiation, not conformity.
Okay, so for a final thought for you, our listener, to take away and maybe chew on, let's bring it back to relationships for a second. The source material points out something interesting.
Yeah, that when a relationship is going really well, we tend to credit mysterious forces like chemistry or destiny. We rarely say, wow, those two are brilliant relationship makers.
We undervalue the actual skills involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Communication, conflict resolution, supporting each other's growth.
Exactly. We treat it like magic, not like a set of abilities that can be learned and honed.
So here's the provocation. If you accept that a growth mindset can help you develop your intelligence, your professional abilities, even your athletic skills through deliberate practice, what specific relationship skill might you be currently writing off as just chemistry or how things are?
Think about it. Is it expressing needs clearly? Is it managing disagreements constructively? Is it actively supporting your partner's goals? What skill are you perhaps dismissing as fixed that you could instead choose to define, practice, and actually master?